me a little teddy bear and a bobcat jersey.
Come on, video. Oh, I keep hitting it. Okay, it takes a second. Okay.
Call this meeting to order, Montana Board of Public Education. We are gathered in the Phyllis Day, Washington College of Education, room 334 on University of Montana campus. Thank you, Dr. Lee, for hosting us here in this beautiful facility. And let us begin our meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Chris, will you please call the roll?
Tim Tharp.
Here.
Susie Hedlund.
Here.
Ann Keith.
Here.
Ron Slinger.
Here.
Madeline Quinlan.
Here.
Jane Hammond.
Here.
Renee Rasmussen.
Here.
Gavin Mao. Superintendent Arnson. Commissioner Christian. Governor Jean Forte.
Here.
Thank you. Montana Board of Public Education encourages the public to participate in board discussions. Persons who wish to participate should sign the public comment sheet and identify themselves to the board chair or executive director prior to the board's consideration of the matter in which the persons are concerned. Anyone wishing to participate in board discussions will be recognized by the chair in keeping with normal board parliamentary procedure. We discourage public comment on personnel matters and ask that you discuss these issues in private with the chair. Montana Board of Public Education is a professional development unit provider. Attending a Board of Public Education meeting may qualify you to receive professional development units. Please complete the necessary information on the sign-in sheet if you are applying for professional development units. Once again, we are pleased to be here at Phyllis J. Washington School of Education, and we'll go through and have everybody who's visitor introduce themselves. Dr. Lee, would you like to start?
Hi, I'm Dan Lee. I'm the dean here at the College of Education. I'd like to welcome you all today, and we'll see what happens tomorrow. I believe a team from Montana is going to win. I'm predicting that.
I'm Jamie McNally. I'm an admin associate here at the college. I'm January Butcher, Deputy Director of Montana Enterprise for Education.
Rob Watson, I'm the Executive Director of School Administrators in Montana.
I'm Representative Dave Beatty, represent House District 86 down in Hamilton. I am an alum of Montana State University, so I feel rather uncomfortable being
You're my friends.
We will after the game.
I think you'll be all right. Dr. Watson and I are both credentialed at both universities, so we're okay. We got your back either way. Are there any visitors online who'd like to be introduced? All right. Seeing none, we will move on. In our board agenda, we are on item number 20, and I will hand things over to our licensure committee chair, Susie Hedlund.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We will start on item 20, which is page 279 of your packet. And you are going to start with information on the annual professional development unit provider list. And if Mary is with us, I will turn it over to her.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me today. I do have my Bobcat gear also, so Representative Beatty, you're good to go. So Madam Chair Quinlan and board members, I am here today to present to you the annual professional development provider report. You can see that in page 279 of your packet. This was developed by the Standards Instruction and Professional Learning Team with the Office of Public Instruction. So I'm just going to work through a few key highlights for you throughout the packet, and please at any point ask me questions or we can wait till the end. Working through the documents, per ARM 1057-216, organizations wishing to offer professional development activities for the award of professional development units must receive approval from the Superintendent of Public Instruction prior to offering the activities. I'm going to share the screen on the packet so that you can see exactly where I am and follow along, especially for those online. If I have the option, there we go. All right, are you able to see that now?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, so you will see linked within here, there's a 38 page list of provided professional development providers. So a few key highlights that you'll see is we still have quite a bit of our PD in the state provided in person. So a third of it about is virtual and 2/3 is in person. I'm sorry, my thing is not scrolling for me. So when we look at the categories, the most frequent we have is actually social emotional learning at 842 opportunities, special education at 559, technology at 487, ELA and literacy at 468, and then general content standards at 452. The least amount that we have currently is nutrition at 70, library media at 123, and English language proficiency at 138. Our next list that you're going to see is the different professional development providers by their different agencies. So whether it's county superintendents, professional education associations, including our curriculum consortiums across the state, schools, tribal and university and colleges, government agencies, including Board of Public Ed, as well as OPI. And I do want to make a note that our data systems do not currently align with our Teacher Learning Hub and the PDUP system, as we call it. And so the number that pulled there is not completely accurate. So I did want to share the updated Teacher Learning Hub numbers for you. So the Teacher Learning Hub actually had 11,813 course completions, issuing 44,826 professional development units. So it is still a live and active tool that we have that we are working on reinvigorating. You'll also see a link in there. Now, it is not required to provide a Teacher Learning Hub report, but we do have it linked in there just so you know what that is and what the different activities and the data behind those are. So as I go through this, you'll see that there is a number of offerings for each one of those, including the number of activities, the number of PDUs, the number of certificates that were issued, as well as if they were online. Altogether, Montana educators, not including the the Teaching Learning Hub, had 45,000 hours of qualified professional development units. With that, I stand for any questions that you may have.
Marie, thanks for this report. This is just really picky, but your header needs to fix the word public.
Oh, look at that. You're absolutely correct. Thank you for that. I will make that correction, Anne.
Sorry.
No, yes, thank you for sharing that.
Member, yes.
Thank you. I did my renewal units to the Montana Board of Public Education. I didn't see them on the list. I couldn't figure out where they were. Can you show me where we are on the list? I don't want my renewal units denied when I go to relicense.
Let me scroll through here. If I stop sharing, it goes a little bit faster for me. So let me scroll through there. And if that's something we needed to make an amendment on because of the data translation, we will absolutely do that. No problem at all. You are correct. It is not on there. So I will make that amendment as well as the header and send that back to you. Thank you, Madam Chair and board members.
Good. Yes, follow-up.
Yes, Member Key.
Marie, just as a follow-up to that, if there's somebody else that's not on the list, that should be, what's the process to get them officially on the list?
That's a great question. So on there, you will see the link of, if I go, I'm going to scroll up to page and tell you what page to look at for yourself. On page 3, it says approved professional development unit provider directory, which is updated every 2 weeks. So if you do not see someone on there or something that you have attended yourself that you believe to have been approved, please go ahead and click on that to see if it's there. And then you can email myself or the OPI PDUPS team, and we will make those corrections.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Are there any further questions or follow-up moments from the board? All right, thank you very so much for your information this morning.
Thank you, and I'll see you all soon.
All right, moving on, to item number 21. This is also under licensure. So Chair Headland.
Action to accept and place on file class 7 licensure criteria for Crow Agency and Northern Cheyenne. Page 302 on our packets. And if Matthew Bell is available, we'll turn it over to him.
Good afternoon, Chairperson Tharp and members of the Board of Public Education. My name is Matthew Bell, spelled B-E-L-L for the record. I am the Language and Culture Specialist at the OPI. I'm here today to present on a component of ARM Chapter 57, Educational Licensure related to Class 7 Language and Culture Specialist License. In particular, the criteria for Crow Agency and Northern Cheyenne for qualifying an individual as competent to be granted a Class 7 Specialist License in the Crow and Northern Cheyenne languages and cultures. Please note this is an action item for the board to consider accepting and placing on file the criteria for these two languages and cultures. At the end of the presentation, I will also briefly provide an update on the Class 7 MOUs for Blackfeet, Chippewa Cree, Fort Belknap, Fort Peck, Confederated Salish and Kootenai, and Little Shell as outlined in 1057-436 parentheses 2. Based on ARM 1057-436-3, for a Class 7 Language and Culture Specialist, the Board of Public Education will accept and place on file the criteria developed by each tribe for qualifying an individual as competent to be a specialist in its language and culture. Please refer to your board packet starting on page 304, where you will find the Memorandum of Understanding and official notice on the signature authority, the Native American Language and Culture certification process for the Absaloka Nation, as well as the recertification process for the Absaloka Nation. At this time, if Loretta Three Irons is here, she was invited. I was hoping she could present on the criteria for developing the Crow tribe criteria. There she is.
Anything else that we should be looking for?
Hello.
Matt, are there any others going to join us for this item?
Mina Seminole from Northern Cheyenne.
Thank you.
On? Should I?
Go ahead, Loretta, if you're ready.
Oh, okay, I'm ready. Good morning to the chairman and members of the board. My Crow name is Ishashkejigitush, which means they respect her horses. Henewabe Itchik, it's a good day. I am the Crow tribe designated Class 7 signature authority on the licensure. And our testing, I usually test the people that are applying for the Class 7. And one of the things that we want them, or I want them to do, is be employed or applying in a school setting. And that's the purpose of the Class 7. The written, I test for their oral proficiency or oral competency. And as I live on the reservation, the Crow reservation, we know each other. And I usually tell the ones that come in, I usually say we know each other. I know who's fluent and who's not, but we go through the process of the testing. So I test for their oral, which is their choice of any topic, any story, Crow story, and speak for about 20 minutes, 20 to 25 minutes. That'll determine their proficiency. If they use, like mix their story up with a lot of English words, then, I really have to look at it. And also we have a written part of the testing, and it's on their our way of life as Absaloka people. our way of life, could be our stories, our songs, anything that they can write about our clan system, our ceremonies, anything. And there's a grandfather clause in our which states that anyone over 55 and are proficient or competent in the language, and if they're working in the school system, then I'll sign their application for my part in the Class 7 process. And I guess that's what I report on today, this morning. So if you have any, that's.
Thank you. Thank you, Loretta, for your presentation.
Yes.
On the criteria developed by the Crow tribe to develop an individual as competent to be granted a Class 7 culture and language specialist for the Apsaalooka Nation. And second, for the second language and culture criteria for the Board of Public Education to consider today, please refer to your packet starting on page 313, where you will find the Northern Cheyenne Tribe Memorandum of Understanding, the authorized signatory, and the certification process for Northern Cheyenne Tribe. And so today we have with us Mina Seminole for the Northern Cheyenne Tribe to present on the criteria. The Seminole, if you're ready.
Yes, please.
Can you hear us, Mina?
You must not have that IT specialist like me in their office.
It's muted on. No, that's.
Well, hopefully Miss Seminole can get her microphone turned on in a minute. And maybe we can come back to her, but I guess in the meantime, I could briefly update the board on the MOUs for Blackfeet, Chippewa Cree, Fort Belknap, Fort Peck, Confederated Salish Kootenai, and Little Shell. As outlined in 1057-436-2, the Superintendent of Public Instruction shall issue a Class 7 license based upon verification by the authorized representative of tribal government that has a memorandum of understanding with the Superintendent of Public Instruction that the applicant has met tribal standards for competency and fluency as a requisite for teaching that language and culture. So each tribe and community has. Oh, do you want to go ahead, Mina?
Yes, I'm
Okay.
sorry I couldn't get on. I didn't. Had a little problem there, but good morning. My name is Mina Seminole, and I have our process for our Class 7. We normally, when a Northern Cheyenne comes in and wants to become a Class 7 instructor or licensed, we usually have them fill out an application, and then we contact our Board of Examiners, which are 5 members that have Class 7. We normally have a meeting. We can have a minimum of 3 members, and then they come in, and this board will test them, and we have them either do a story, or they can write it, or both. And so then the board, the applicant will take this story, usually it's been a story, they will read it, it's in English, and then they come back to the panel and they translate the story into Cheyenne. And meanwhile, then the board will, we have an oral exam recording sheet that we use, and it has like the ease of expression, the complexity, accuracy, vocabulary, but there's a score there. And then they will score the applicant. And based on that, we determine if they are, if they pass the test, we give them a score. And then from there, a signatory, who right now is Bird Medicine Bowl, he will sign off on that, and then they can go and get the application for the state licensure. So that's kind of it's kind of a lengthy process, but we want to make sure that, we cover all the bases of the fluency level, the cultural knowledge. And normally the people have not been doing a written test. We've had several that have done the written test, but we try to work towards getting them to start writing the language, but mostly their ability to translate, from one language to another is what we test for. Any questions?
Thank you, Mina. Yep, and we could stand for questions for these two languages at this time.
Thank you, Mina and Matthew Bell. Are there any questions from the board? All right, Mr. Chair, I stand to motion. Matthew, would you like to share more information about the MOUs?
Oh, just briefly regarding the other tribes. Each tribe has their MOU and resolution. Some of them are still operating, or they're all still operating under the same resolutions they had before. And we're working on keeping everything up to date. We have up-to-date MOU from Blackfeet tribe, but their education committee is currently reviewing their resolution criteria, classification criteria. Chippewa Cree, they're still operating under their previous resolution and are in early stages of council review regarding the resolution and certification process. Fort Belknap and Fort Peck are both still operating under their previous resolution, and they recently had tribal elections, and we're opting to wait for those seats to settle before any possible review and revision. And Confederated Salish and Kootenai still operating under their resolution, as well as Little Shell Tribe. So that's the update.
Thank you, Matthew. We're very grateful for you joining us this morning, both of you, and all of the information you provided.
Thank you.
Member Hammond.
Madam Chair, thank you. I'm wondering if you could speak to whether you have been asked to share information with other tribes in other states about the procedures that you have developed here. It seems to me we're ahead of most states in this progress, and I'm wondering if you could share the extent to which that's becoming known around the country.
Thank you for your question. Privately, I guess in person, I've not been contacted by anyone out of state. We've had a few opportunities when sharing at national conferences, such as the National Indian Education Conference, to speak about these subjects and share out, but nothing too formal coming across state lines.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further comment or follow-up from the board? All right, thank you for making a motion.
Me too.
I move to accept and place on file Class 7 licensure criteria for Crow Agency and Northern Cheyenne tribes.
Okay, for the motion, is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion amongst the board? Just want to say thank you, Matt, for your work and all of the tribe members for all of their just trying to have the language preservation so vital part of your history and so vital for Montana. And we thank you for your efforts. No board comment? Any public comment? All in favor, say aye.
I,
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
Next item is item number 22. Action on the superintendent's educator license fee proposal. I just want to preface this discussion with some comments. This has been very frustrating process we have been going through. As we've been going back and forth and had many meetings and Zooms and discussions and emails back and forth, trying to get information, trying to understand the information and things that we've just not felt comfortable with what has been provided to the board, and if it's been complying with the requirements of House Bill 403. We've had questions about the general fund being included, where we understand there are certain criteria within the law. We've questioned the FTE. They're supposed to have been at FTE reduction, but yet the cost keeps going up. We've questioned the $185,000 ongoing annual cost, which seems pretty high. And then a lot of public comment we've received that has been, quite frankly, blasting the board and the OPI for raising these fees, and how dare we do that, when the reality is this is something that we need to do because of the requirements given to us by the legislature in House Bill 403. So it has been quite a frustrating experience all the way through here. And before I give the meeting over to Chair Hedlund, I'd like to ask Representative Beatty to come forward and share his thoughts and just kind of preface the background on this and his interpretation coming from the legislature before we go forward. Representative Beatty.
Well, thank you, Chairman Thorpe and members of the board. For the record, my name is Representative David Beatty, served House District 86 in Hamilton. Of course, one of the reasons that I'm sitting in front of you is that I am the author of House Bill 403, but I have an interest in this particular issue that goes beyond the fact that I drafted and carried the bill through the legislature where it was eventually passed into law. During the 2023 legislative session, I was the chairman of the Joint Appropriations Subcommittee for Education, and currently I chair the Education Interim Budget Committee, which exercises legislative oversight over the Office of Public Instruction and other education-related agencies, including the Board of Public Education. In this capacity, I am charged with seeing to it that agency spending, in this case the OPI, conforms with state law. And as pertains to the agenda item before you, once again, I do have a very deep understanding, I won't undersell it, of House Bill 403, what the legislative intent was, and how the law stands right now. And I really appreciate this opportunity to discuss 403 with you. I hope that I will be happy, I should say, to answer any of your questions concerning the genesis of this bill and its legislative intent. But given the recent things I've been reading in the newspaper across the state, op-eds that I think serve to muddy the water on this issue, I'd just like to review what this bill is all about. Montana Code Annotated 20-4-109, as amended by House Bill 403, requires that OPI's licensure system fully funded by special revenue derived from licensing, and that the superintendent of public instruction shall recommend fees that are sufficient for meeting this requirement. It then falls upon the Board of Public Education to evaluate that proposal and then to take action. The requirements of the law are unambiguous, but I did run it by our legal staff yet one more time. They confirmed that my reading of English was correct. So just to be clear, the legislative licensure activities that are performed by the OPI are to be funded fully by license fees. That is, and those license fees flow into a special revenue account. This is not the general fund. And this does not put educators as professionals into a different box than any other profession or trade across the state. Every other trade or profession has their license fees established based upon the cost of operating their licensure activity. And in each of those cases, the way this is exercised is by having the relevant agency make a recommendation to whatever governing board there is for that profession, and then license fees are established. House Bill 403 is modeled directly after how we treat other professionals in the state. And it was my view as I put this bill together that teachers and other educators being professionals ought to fall under the same umbrella that all other professionals do in the state. Now, you won't be surprised because I've communicated with the board at a couple of times over the last month, providing an evaluation of the various proposals that I've seen come from the superintendent of public instruction. And I find that, as perhaps you do, that the last and latest, maybe best offer from the superintendent of public instruction clearly fails to meet the requirements of House Bill 403 in that it heavily relies upon general fund revenue, particularly in the second year of the biennium and by implication going forward. This, as I said earlier, is absolutely at odds with the law. And what I find troubling about this matter, and I sense that perhaps the chairman shares some of that concern, although I'm not a mind reader, is that the superintendent was made aware of this deficiency in the proposal that was provided to you, and yet continued to promote that flawed recommendation. So here we are. Now, one matter I think that needs to be brought to your attention, and I did this in the letters, but for the record, let me just say that the superintendent has maintained that she is unable to meet the law's requirement due to a shortfall in appropriation authority in House Bill 2. This, I will admit to the fact that House Bill 2 special revenue authority is less than is necessary to fund the operation. This was due to a clerical error when the bill was put together. This situation, though, is easily remedied by way of asking for a supplemental appropriation. This is not to ask for additional money. The authority to spend the money is reflected in House Bill 2, and we routinely in House Bill 3 at the start of every legislative session adjust agency budgets to meet this sort of situation. I mean, I know this for a fact. I carried House Bill 3 in 2021, and for example, the Department of Revenue's Alcohol Beverage and Control Board, which raises proprietary funds to fund its activities, came to the legislature saying, we raised all this money, but we don't have the authority to spend it. And so a supplemental appropriation is made in that particular case. The solution to the shortfall in authority for spending money reflected in House Bill 2 is easily and can be routinely remedied. And I would urge the superintendent to go forward with that. Now, it's clear in the op-eds that I've read recently that the superintendent of public instruction is intent on keeping teacher license fees at $30 for a 5-year license, which has been the level that it's been at since 1991. But I would like you just, and some other comparisons to other states are made within that op-ed. A bit of cherry picking on legislative studies that we did. By the way, we did studies last interim, several studies trying to understand how to best fund the Board of Public Education, and that's where this popped up immediately. But just to give you context, if you take a look at the 4 states surrounding Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, Wyoming, and Idaho, you'll find that the 5-year license fee average for those states is $110 a year. $110 for a 5-year license, which comes to $22 a year. We certainly should the board adopt what I believe is a or a recommendation your licensure committee has put forward, you're clearly going to be below that average. And just as a point of the record. Now, of course, one of the reasons that I put this bill together, besides just my desire to have conformity amongst professions across the state, of which educators are an important profession in that realm. One of the reasons that I put this in place was to draw attention to the fact that license fees are based upon operating expenses. The best way to keep license fees under control is to control your operating expenses. The superintendent of public instruction procured a system which I guess the jury's out on how effective it is right now. It was recently put into place. That system I think is a bit more expensive in terms of its ongoing maintenance costs. I have nothing to offer you in terms of trying to confirm whether that's correct or not. There seems to be a bit of confusion in that particular area. But I think that there may be opportunities going forward to reduce operating costs. It may require even moving off of the recently procured platform. It might involve moving to a licensure software system that is used by every other profession across the state. I can provide you a solid recommendation in that area, but I think that the next superintendent of public instruction will have an opportunity to take a look at ways to make sure that there's cost containment of this area. But as it stands right now, the necessary increase in license fees that would be necessary to fulfill the requirements of state law certainly are not excessive, and certainly are not excessive with respect to our neighboring states. And with that, I look forward to fielding questions. I feel like I'm in a legislative hearing. Trust me, I've been through this ringer many, many times. I just have to brush up a little bit. I go through many ringers.
Thank you, Representative. And I can confirm I'm licensed fully in North Dakota as a teacher and an administrator. And when I renewed my 5-year license there, it cost me $210. At this point, we'll hand the meeting over to our licensure chairperson, Susie Hedlund. Sue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate you being here today, Representative Beatty, and sharing your information and your intent. This is very challenging, and I also have that question, and I don't know if we have anyone from OPI with us. I see Jay there, yes, but I don't know if you can answer the question of why we're using a separate system that has such a lofty maintenance fee. If you can share any insight on why we're not using the same licensure system that the rest of the state is using. Is that something you can provide insight on, Jay?
Yeah, so Mr. Chairman, members of the board, for the record, Jay Phillips, PHI, LLIPS, CFO for OPI. So I can't speak to the specifics of whether we could switch to another system. I will say that the intention, I think, as part of the database modernization project was to take an antiquated system and make something that was more efficient and effective for the teachers that are actually applying for the licenses now. To Representative Beatty's point, is there other systems that we could use that's industry, utilized across the industry for multiple types of licenses? I mean, again, I think that would be a conversation with the superintendent, but I know that the intention was for a benefit of the teachers to replace the old MSIS system itself. But that's about all I could represent, Ms. Hedlund. So thank you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any questions or comments from the board? Member.
Thank you. Representative Beatty, I'm a retired teacher, and we received hundreds of emails from teachers across the state. So I know a lot of them are listening in right now. Can you simplify what are our options as a board today? Like, what are our options so teachers know the constraints we're working under?
Thank you, and that's Ms. Keith.
Yes.
Well, listen, I think the law is clear that you must have a schedule of license fees that fully fund the system. So that is the major constraint here. There are some that would like to have general fund support for this, but that is precluded by law right now. Should there be a desire to hold teacher that, I mean, these are license fees for administrators and teachers and specialists. To hold the teacher license fee at its current level which it has been at since 1991 and is lower than any of our contiguous states, that would demand an increase in license fees for other classes of licenses. And I think that those increases in license fees, in my mind, would be excessive, punitive, and in my mind would not be acceptable. I know that teachers across the state may be listening to this. As I maintained throughout the hearing process, of which there were many opportunities for folks to weigh in on this, both in the House and the Senate, as the bill went through the process. I am the son of a teacher and an administrator. My late father fulfilled both of those functions. I come from an education family. I was a school board chairman. I understand the challenges that our teachers have, but I think that to suggest that what is, I believe, will be a modest increase in teacher license fees is somehow going to destroy recruitment and retention. I think no one can seriously take that position. We do have a problem there, and I think that this license fee issue is a distraction from that problem. What we ought to do, if you would allow me to opine on this, is we ought to take a look at ensuring that districts understand the possibilities they have with state support from the Teach Act, which has the effect of compressing license salary schedules and thus increasing starting teacher pay. I think that to have a serious discussion on teacher salaries in the state requires not looking at a single average for schools across the state. So I guarantee there are class AA schools where the starting salaries are quite competitive. However, the problems we have are most likely in rural Montana. Where what we need to do is we need to understand the scope and the breadth and the diversity of this particular problem and get after it. I'm committed to working on that sort of thing, and I'm committed to working on it from a position of understanding of knowledge and understanding of the situation, not seeking to do sound bites on this. Our teachers are professionals. We're not asking for the required license fee is not exorbitant, particularly compared to other educators in other states. It certainly isn't exorbitant when you take a look at the license fee paid by other professions, which are in almost every case are much, much higher. Speech therapists, I think, are like $110 a year, as an example. I would ask our teachers across the state to ask their school boards to take a look at what the Teach Act might do for them. And perhaps in the next legislative session, we can do more with the Teach Act, or perhaps find some other creative solutions. But until we get serious about really understanding the diversity of this problem and and where we need to focus our effort the most, which I opine is in predominantly rural Montana, but not exclusively, we're not going to make that much progress.
Thank you.
Follow-up question.
I appreciate your commitment to this effort. Member Keith, and then I see your hand is up as well, Mr. Phillips.
I just need to clarify for the record. So the numbers we are given today, there's no negotiation as far as what we need to cover.
The numbers that were now, I believe that the licensure committee has its own a recommendation. That recommendation, I've seen a draft of it, and I'm just not sure what the status of the recommendation is. That recommendation will meet the requirements of law because it raises enough revenue to do so in the second year of the biennium. the superintendent's recommendation, you fall short, and I don't see how you can negotiate your way out of something that's simple, other than to reject that particular recommendation. Unfortunately, it's too bad that it doesn't conform, but we find ourselves where we are. And I think that the board's only other option is to go forward and with an eye towards compliance with the law.
Thank you.
Mr. Phillips.
Thank you, members of the board. So just real quick, I just want to address the discussion around the authority. And so I appreciate Representative Beatty kind of confirming for us that, during legislative session that we were not given enough appropriation to cover the costs in the state special. The one thing I do want to get clarification on, or make sure that everybody's aware of this, is that it was our understanding that, like in the bill language itself, there isn't anything in there that says that we have the authority or ability to request a supplemental for this. And so we based the proposal off of the fact that we were going off of what was fully available in that state special appropriation, which did leave a shortfall, which means that additional portion of appropriation that would be needed would have to come from general fund. Now, what that said is, if we do have that ability as an agency, and OBPP, the governor's office, will approve a supplemental, then the proposal that we would have put forward would actually have reflected that. And the fee schedule would have been based on everything coming out of that state special as intended in 403 and through MCA. So I just want to make sure it's clear that there is no intention here to not follow the intention of House Bill 403 or to be non-compliant with MCA. It's really more of just a matter of our understanding that we didn't have that capability to request a supplemental. So the fee structure itself is based on the appropriation for that state special, and ensure that fees are commensurate with costs. We set it at that level. So just want to make sure that's clear. But again, there's no intention here to not follow law. And if we have the ability to do a supplemental, we're more than happy to do that so that we can draw all of the actual costs being paid from those licensure fees. So thank you.
Yes, Chairman Thar, Vice Chair Hedlund. In order to dot all the i's and cross the t's, I have discussed this at length with the governor's budget office, and have been assured that there is nothing that precludes the superintendent of public instruction from requesting a supplemental to that office. I dealt informally with the deputy director, and the chief analyst there in their office did provide a written analysis of the situation, and included the fact that a supplemental would be an appropriate way to go forward.
Hey, first of all, I wanted to ask Jay, did you have a further presentation you wanted to make?
Ms. Chair, Board Member Quinlan, no, I was just here to actually answer questions, and I appreciate the opportunity, because I did just want to make sure that it was clear that intention here is to follow the law to its intent. And again, going off what Chair Beatty just said, if we have that capability to work with the budget director as well as Ms. Hall up at the LBPP, we'll absolutely take care of that. Thank you.
Then, oh, sorry, I do have a statement I want to make. And I think most of you know, I worked at the Office of Public Instruction for 27 years, and I was involved in many of the information systems that were developed over time, including the very beginning of Mayfair's, going way back. So I think what's key, the thing I keep thinking about is the licensure system needs to connect into several other OPI information systems. And the goal of the agency, and it is it's a hard goal to meet, but is to integrate the systems of data within the office. And what I sort of take issue, because I've had a couple of conversations where people are like, well, why don't you go borrow somebody else's licensure system? And I just want to be clear that there's lots of linkages out of the state our educator licensure system to accreditation, to school funding, and to other areas of the education funding system. And I think, I'm pretty confident in saying that the educate, the engineer licensing system or the plumber's licensing system is not used to distribute school funding. So, that's where I'm having trouble with the maintenance fee that now exists for educator licensure. How much of that is really the responsibility of teachers to sort of get through the process of securing their license versus how much of that also meets state needs that have to do with very constitutional requirements that we have for basic system of following public schools. So I feel the need to put that out there. I'm perfectly prepared to act today and to meet the requirements of House Bill 403. But my frustration is I don't really know where the possible licensure system ends and the other needs of state government and provision of funding to schools begins, and to secure a system of effective and quality health quality.
Thank you, Member Quinlan. I know there's discussion of this system connecting to the accreditation system as well now. And I'm also confused by that. I think that it's important. I know as an administrator, I'm quite frustrated every time I have to spend days at my desk entering data that is already in the computer into a report to OPI. And we've been talking about this challenge for many, many years. It takes us away from working with teachers and students. However, and so, we know the importance of these systems being put in place and linking together with accreditation and licensure and all of that so that we have a seamless data system. And so if we are connecting these systems and it is also working with accreditation, I don't understand either how this falls on our license fees to move that. So I know that the licensure committee has some information to present before that. Member Rasmussen?
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to switch gears a little bit and ask you a question. You said you've done some research into licensing fees for other professionals. Can you talk to me a little bit about structure of those fees? I guess I'm looking at in education, fees are, you have a lot of different types of licenses. You have a class 2, you have a class 3, you have a class 4. Some to get you need a master's degree, some you need master's plus degree. Is there anything comparable in anything else that you ran across and kind of inform us as we build up a fee structure that meets House Bill 403?
Chairman Tharp and Board Member Rasmussen, I don't think I can provide anything that goes to that. I mean, the structure of license fees, I have a list of them here, breaks down by professions, and sometimes there's some discrimination within those professions, but generally it's an engineer sort of thing. However, I think that a useful way to think about it is you have the various different educators that are covered by this licensing system, and one way to think about that, I suppose, is that each of those is a separate profession, and it's I think you can kind of map the thinking against what's done for the other professions in that particular way. Now, what that may mean is that there potentially is a degree of complexity in the licensure system that's required. I won't opine on things that I don't have an awful lot of direct knowledge on, but I think that certainly is surmountable. What it costs to get there, I don't know. I found that Ms. Quinlan's discussion on linkages to other systems is an interesting proposition. My understanding, though, is that the costs that are being presented by OPI are the costs exclusively for the licensure portion of that, And one would think that, and once again, I'm starting to get on dicey ground here, that other expenditures, probably almost certainly funded by the general fund, are covering other aspects of accreditation, et cetera, et cetera. A complex situation that demands a careful evaluation, no doubt.
Okay, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, members of the board. So real quick, I just want to touch base on that, the accreditation comment. So that was kind of one of the questions that OPI received, is that they had heard that we were working to integrate a portion of the accreditation with the new TMT system. And are we sure that those costs will actually be isolated? And I can give the board assurance that yes, that is the fact. Anytime we have multiple things within a system that can benefit multiple programs, we actually keep that self-identified, so then we can charge directly just those costs. So the licensing fees and all that stuff that you guys, the board, is going to set today, or working to set, will only fund those licensure fee activities, and anything with the accreditation activities, that program, even though it integrates part with that TMT, those will be, again, separate and absent of that. So it'll be a different funding source for those. But just want to make sure that you guys are aware that we do have a mechanism, and we'll make sure that those costs are split out. Thank you.
Thank you for that information. Further comment or question before the licensure committee presents information? I'll turn it over to Nicole.
Don't go too far.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people behind you.
So Madam Chair, this is the, basically just reflects the conversation that the licensure committee had. You'll see at the bottom there, the total estimated revenues is $525,738. I believe the information that you have in your packet from the superintendent indicates that in fiscal year 2025, the system will need $528,707. This is a really good effort to get close to that. If you'd like, I can sort of better explain maybe what those numbers mean. The $85 is $17 a year. The $70 is actually $14 a year. Again, just remember these are 5-year figures. Basically, anyone with a master's degree is at 85. So you'll see the class 1 professional teaching licenses are at 85. The class 3 administrators are at 85. And then same with the class 6 specialists are at 85. You'll also see down below that emergency authorizations and internships are at 85, and that's because those are 1-year licenses and typically picked up by the school district. So those would be at paid actually at $17 whenever they're actually utilizing either an emergency authorization or internship. All of the other licenses are at 70, which again is $14 a year. There is a slight increase in the application fees from $6 to $10, and those are only for new applications. And then in order to get to the $525,000, it was important to keep those technology fees, which is $25 per license. That generates $125,000, and frankly, is almost the greatest figure up there. So that is the final sort of calculation of estimated revenues that the licensure committee came up with, trying to, in good faith, come forward with an effort and an estimate that gets to the amount that the board is sort of held to based on the calculations of the superintendent.
Member Kate.
Thanks. McCall, that $25 is over the 5 years, so it's like $5 a year, or is it 25 a year?
Correct. No, it's 25 one time, so $5 a year.
Okay.
I guess I ask you to drive on Excel. Can you perform 2 calculations for us? One for a standard teacher Because I know I was union president for quite a while and I've done lots of contract negotiations, so I know most folks look at these things and say, well, what's the bottom line for me? So I'd like to see what is the total cost for the 5-year license for a standard teaching license, a class 2, with the fees, the application, the tech,
For brand new,
brand new, and then what would be different for renewal?
so a standard teacher up here is $70. So 70 plus the $25 technology fee is 95. If they're a brand new first-time teacher, they'll also pay the application fees. They'll be $10. So it'd be 105, but every time they apply 5 years after that would be 95.
And then for an administrator, and an
So-
administrator typically is going to have a class 1 and a class 3 license.
So an administrator is at 85, which is class 3. The professional teaching license is also at 85 because they have a master's. So that's 170 on its own. If they wouldn't have a new teaching, or they wouldn't have a new application fee because there's no something like teaching. But they would have the $25 technology fee. And Jay, I may have you clarify this, but it's my understanding that it is $25 a license and not an application. So it'll be $220.
Yeah, so board chair, Director McCall. So yeah, actually, I did clarify that, and that's why I was raising my hand, is that there is the ability to only charge one tech fee for multiple license endorsements. And so when I talked to our chief operating officer, that in that row 28 where you have that 5,009 in that green bar, if you reduce that by 450, so take it to 4,559, it'll drop your revenues by about just a little over 10,000, close to 11,000. But yeah, so like to Chairman Tharp's question about that having multiple endorsements, that tech fee would only apply just one time in that circumstance.
So it applies to individual, not.
Correct. That's my understanding. So it'll be 195 for an administrator.
So, Representative Beatty, in your interpretation as the author of this bill and as chairman of the interim committee, is the 514 we see on the board sufficient, or do we need to tweak it?
I say, Chairman Tharp, I think, naturally, the estimates for the operating expenses are not hard and fast numbers. There's always naturally some uncertainty in that. I think that the number that you have put forward here at 514 is in close enough agreement with the projected, with the projection that that you could go forward with this particular recommendation.
All right, other questions or comments from the board? Okay. Member Aspen.
This is for Mr. Phillips. Mr. Phillips, I know that you gave a 5-year license average, you know, when you made your projections here, which we're using those numbers. I don't know if you did the projections or someone else, but can you tell me, are these numbers trending up or are they trending down? Which they're trending, if they're staying stable, we're okay. If they're trending down, then we're maybe in trouble, or can you even answer that question?
Mr. Chairman, members of the board. So yeah, let me look. You are correct in that we did do a 5-year average. Let me just take a quick look at some of the individuals here. It does look like, well, they do fluctuate. So, back in like an example, class 1 professional teaching, back in 2019, there was 1,263. And then it did drop a little bit in 22 down to 1164. But as of 23 for this year, we're back up to like 1708. And so I think that initial dip we had kind of during COVID is starting to bounce back a little bit. Now, to your point about some of that fluctuation, the one good thing about 403 that Chair Beatty and had actually put in there is that we can retain at least twice the appropriation of working capital. And so with your guys' projection you have now, because the total cost are only going to be around 326 and 24, you'll have a little bit of working capital in there. So that should hopefully kind of offset those licensing fee fluctuations. But again, kind of until we get, the finalize of 24, we won't know. But, I'm pretty confident that what you guys are proposing, if we keep it that, at the actual costs, the revenues coming in, then we'll have enough to accommodate any of those fluctuations.
Thank you.
I have a couple of questions about the listing that we see on the Excel spreadsheet. What is the difference between the line that says emergency authorization and then the subsequent line that says emergency authorization application fee?
The emergency authorization is what you would pay for that authorization. It's not, right? You know what I mean? It's the license. Yes, and those are 1 year only. So that will actually be $17 a year that they'll pay that. The next line is just the application fee for those. So they will always have an application fee because it's always 1 year.
And what is the amount of that application?
$10.
$10. All right. And so that logic applies to the internship lines as well?
Correct.
Thank you, that was my question.
Further follow-up? All right, I have a few comments and then as we move into a motion, Mr. Chairman. So I appreciate my colleagues' work, and I am on the licensure committee, and know that, there was great work put into this to try to meet the criteria of the law, and know that we are tasked with doing so as the Board of Public Education. However, the bottom line is that it states that the superintendent of public instruction shall recommend to the Board of Public Education annual and filing fee amount sufficient to generate the revenue required to administer the teacher and specialist licensure program. And currently the proposal we have is not meeting that. So that's where I find this very challenging. I think that our only option is to wait to vote until we receive a proposal that meets the criteria of the law from the superintendent of public instruction.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess I have a question for Representative Beatty. What is your interpretation of this? I'm prepared to make a motion that we proceed with the schedule as on the screen. And I guess I ask you as the bill author and legislative intent on this, do we have to wait for the superintendent to give us a recommendation that meets this, or can we tweak that recommendation and fulfill the requirements of the law?
Chairman Tharp, when I put this bill together, I did not envision a situation whereby the superintendent of public instruction would provide a recommendation that did not fully fund the system. So but my intent was never that we would find the Board of Public Education in a position where they had were stuck, where there was a stalemate and that sort of thing. The superintendent has provided you a recommendation. It should have been one that by law that reflected fully funding this. I think that, but at the end of the day, it's the Board of Public Education's duty to establish the fees, taking the superintendent's recommendation into consideration. I think that you would be on, in my mind, this legislator, my intent, bill I put together, I think that you would be within your bounds to take whatever action you would want, taking the superintendent's proposal into account, essentially rejecting that proposal as inadequate and substituting it with your own. Once again, it is an uncomfortable position because and I am flabbergasted actually that we find ourselves in the place that we are. But the point of the law was not to defund school licensure systems. It was to set fees commensurate with costs. And I would suggest that you can look forward to do that. Should you wish it. On the other hand, I understand that board member Evelyn's position. You could punt this back to the superintendent. I know that you have made the superintendent aware of this in the past. Perhaps the superintendent doubled down on her proposal. Perhaps it was because of a misunderstanding on supplemental appropriations. Maybe. But that's not the way I read the op-eds. But that's once again, I think you are, although it is somewhat unknown ground, my view as legislative intent is that you are the authority and must act on the information you have. And if that information is inadequate, then you must take the necessary action.
Thank you, Representative. And as much as I respect and love my colleague and friend, and part of the power of this board and of our democracy is that we can respectfully disagree. And so I recognize your hand, Commander Asper said, I'm going to make a motion and then we'll come to it. All right. And so consistent with other action of this board where we receive recommendations from the superintendent and the Office of Public Instruction, and then those decisions then belong in the hands of this board to act on, to either edit or accept or move forward with our own. Consistent with that, I make a motion that we accept the fee schedule as seen on the screen and pass this and give it back to the Office of Public Instruction for implementation. Is there a second? A second from board member Cameron. Board discussion. Member Atkinson.
Thank you. Question for Mr. Phillips. I'm not sure that you can answer this. Actually, probably Crystal should have been on to be able to answer this. When do people start renewing their licenses? Because our next meeting would be in January. I know that there's a lot of people that start renewing early. If you tell me, oh my goodness, there's a big push in January, then that kind of changes what we have or should do here, just for the idea of clarity, that if we're not going to run into people don't start until March or April, then that gives us some time for January. But
we have until December 1st.
We have until December 1st. Never mind.
And in addition to that, you can't start renewing your license until 6 months before. So the earliest that OPI will receive an application is January 1st. Mr. Phillips, can you confirm that then?
Mr. Chairman, that's correct. Yeah. So again, the bill itself doesn't start until January 1st. And so at that point, we'll start, we would implement the new fee schedule. That's correct.
If I can make a comment. Well, I appreciate your get it done work style. I know we have 2 meetings in November that are very full and packed as well, to go over our charter school bills, for example, and as was requested by the Montana School for the Deaf and Blind. I know that we have those 2 meetings coming up, and so we will be together again before December. And I just want to reiterate one more time that I think that we put it back to the superintendent for a good faith proposal that meets the criteria of the law.
The board comment. Oh, yeah, Brianna.
Yes, I worked for a time with the professional development of the Chamber of Commerce, and there were many similar disturbing and upsetting to many people conversations around cost and licensing. And in every instance, we came out with a proposal that was based on exactly the same principles as this, one after another, of commensurate with costs and what is the most equitable within that premium. So I want to commend the licensing committee for the work that has been done, and I think we ought to adopt it today and be done.
Public comment.
Hi, everyone. Jenny Vernan Butcher, Deputy Director of Montana's Organized for Education. I just want to first commend you on how deeply you're thinking about this issue, and we appreciate that you're in a really tough spot. I guess part of the public comment you've received was from parents and community members, which we represent. And they're concerned that our teachers are taking on costs that could be reduced at OPI. And while I do recognize that our neighboring states have higher licensure, we're also 51st in the nation for teacher pay. We're at $33,500 for average starting salary, and the nearest neighboring state in Idaho is $7,000 more than that. So I just don't know if that's a fair comparison. And so I would just encourage you to think about what could OPI do potentially to reduce the overall cost. I know that we have concerns in general about that before we make a final decision that puts their budget shortfalls on the backs of our educators. So, thank you.
Thank you. For the public comment.
Hi, Casey Ballou. I'm a teacher here in Missoula, and I serve as the president of the Missoula Education Association. I would also ask you to wait. I would point out that this has not been published, and it does put the onus on teachers in a pretty substantial way. At the same time as the change in systems that we saw last year, which was the year, also puts more onus on teachers to go through and do more of the process themselves. So we see ourselves doing more work, getting into the system and putting in for our recertification, and now paying more for it without notice that this is a substantial change. So I would ask you to put this to one of your November meetings and give us a chance to really look at this and have a chance to process it and give the public comment.
Watson?
Thank you, Board Member Tharp and members of the board. For the record, Rob Watson, School Administrators in Montana. I appreciate all the work that's been done on this. I just want to say that I want to make a few comments, and the reason I feel necessary to do so is obviously don't know where the board is headed with this decision, and rightfully you guys are debating a good issue in front of you, but because of that, I feel like I do need to make a few comments on the superintendent's proposal that is in your packet today, realizing that it may look much different based on the current proposal from the licensure committee, and I do appreciate all the work. Couple of things I just want to point out. I don't understand completely how other professions are licensed, but one thing I've heard consistently is that the fees that are set in other professions have to be commensurate with the work that's done to actually establish those fees or establish the license for an individual. So for example, I'm assuming that to license a dentist in the state probably costs more than to license a dental hygienist. Some of that's based on the difference, obviously, in education, but some of that's based on the fact that the simple work involved in licensing a dentist is probably more work than licensing a dental hygienist. If you decide to go with the superintendent's proposal, the license for an administrator is 7.5 times higher than a license for a teacher. Now, please understand, and I said this last time, administrators should pay more, and we do pay more in terms of licensing fees. But the question I would have for OPI, does it really take 7.5 times longer to license an administrator than it does a teacher? I don't believe the fees that are set by the superintendent are commensurate with the work that needs to be done to license an administrator. The only other point I wanted to make, and this is based strictly again on the superintendent's recommendation, not the recommendation from the licensure committee. But I mentioned this last time to you, and I just want to share some data with you. So there's an assumption being made that that professionals that are administrators should pay more, and that we should balance this on the fact of those professionals that do make more money. In fact, I'm not going to quote specifically what's been said in the press, but I do think it's relevant here. And since Representative Beatty brought it up, I think it's probably fair I could say something too. But this is one of the quotes that came out of a recent press article. It seems that an increase to this higher compensated group of professionals is a better solution. I want you to be aware of exactly who this group is. And so I did just some simple math using the 369 there on line number 4, 300, I think it's 369. My eyes are really bad in calls. That 369. 369 that's a 5-year average. That's about 1,800 total people that are licensed with an administrator license. Does that make sense? So 369 times 5, over 1,800. What I believe 1,800 people in the state that have that admin license. School Administrators Montana, we have about 99% membership. That's being said that the working administrators in the state, about 99% of them belong to our organization. We only have about 800 administrators in our membership roles. That means that's a delta, that's a difference of 1,000 people that are living in Montana or living outside Montana that hold that admin license that are not necessarily working administrators. So there's an assumption made that this only impacts working administrators, but it impacts much more than that. You may ask, well, who are those 1,000 people? Give you a really quick anecdote here. We recently established an aspiring principals cohort. We have 50 people in our aspiring principals cohort. They're from all over the state. They are current working teachers. And those are members of those 1,000 people that may hold an administrative license. We had a cohort webinar just the other night. We hold our webinars at night because those teachers are busy during the day. We had a teacher, and I won't tell you what community she was from, but it's a really small community. She was driving the bus because she's a coach. So she was driving her team back to her hometown, and she was participating in our webinar over the phone. She wasn't on Zoom, but she was participating. She's a working teacher. I want that person to be an administrator someday because that's the kind of dedication that we want in our administrators. She is a person that will be impacted by the decision if you decide to go with the superintendent's recommendation. That's not a working administrator, but she'll be impacted by these fees. And I want to make sure that we also acknowledge recruitment and retention of our future administrators. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dr. Watson. Mr. Phillips, you have your hand up?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. So just real quick, I just want to comment that, if the board does make the decision to go ahead and send back the proposal to the superintendent, that's your discretion. I will say that if we do have the opportunity, we do submit a new proposal, absolutely we'll ensure that it complies with the law and with the bill's intentions, that the full authority in the state special and the revenues that are collected will be utilized to offset the program's costs. With that said, though, the discussions around the teacher fees, I just want to remind the board that throughout session, and since these discussions have happened, the superintendent has been very adamant that she is not going to increase teacher fees, that she believes that holding them harmless, those that are in the trenches day to day, but yet are still the lowest paid, in our state for industry wise, that she's not going to continue to put additional fiscal burden on them. So if the board does make that decision, we're happy to come back, take a look at it. But again, I just want to make sure the board is clear that the superintendent, his intention is to continue to hold teachers harmless. So thank you, Mr. Chair. Or Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Jay. Other public comment? All right, we will proceed with the vote. Motion on the floor is to approve the fee schedule as on the screen. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Okay. Vote reflects 6-1, and the motion carries. Thank you all for your time and effort, and we will take a 10-minute recess.
That's nice.
Look. Okay. Call this meeting back to order, the Montana Board of Public Education. Again, for anybody joining us electronically, we are meeting at the Phillips J. Washington College of Education. We are room 334 at the University of Montana. Both moved by my vice chair to be wearing her Bobcat colors today.
Oh, go Cats.
And we will continue with our agenda. We are now on item number 23, and these next several items are considering accreditation. So I will hand the meeting over to our accreditation chair, Ms. Quinlan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And our next agenda item is item 23, action on the superintendent's request to revise Title 1055 health and science, health enhancement for health and science program delivery standards. Welcome, Julie. We've heard a presentation at the last meeting, and I want to give you an opportunity to add anything to that. If you have anything you want to share.
Thank you. Good morning, Madam Chair Quinlan and members of the board. My name is Julie Murgel, spelled M-U-R-G-E-L for the record. I'm the Chief Program Officer at the Montana Office of Public Instruction. So this agenda item is presented to the board to consider the timeline and the process for the revision of ARM 1055-1301 and 1501, the Health and Science Program Delivery Standards, which reside in the accreditation standards. The proposed timeline is available in your board packet on page 327. So using the negotiated rulemaking process, the superintendent is seeking to revise Chapter 55 Program Delivery Standards for Health and PE to align with 20-7-121 MCA. In particular, this statute addresses excused absences for curriculum requirements. Within the statute, a parent or guardian or person who is responsible for the care of a child may refuse to allow the child to attend or withdraw the child from a course of instruction, a class period, assembly, or organized school function or instruction provided by the district through its staff or guest invited at the request of the district regarding human sexuality instruction. So as we spoke with you in the last meeting, we addressed that we would be seeking to revise only the program delivery standards that reside in the accreditation chapter. And those delivery standards are outlined that talk about the conditions and practices that are utilized when you are implementing content standards. So this proposal would not seek to open up the content standards for health and science, but rather just be about in which way the school districts deliver those content standards, and in particular, this component of regarding human sexuality instruction. So it is our intention to seek from the superintendent, from the board, to open these standards for revision and review. And I want to stress again, it would be strictly for 1055, 1301, and 1055, 1501. I stand for any questions that you might have.
Thank you. Before we go to questions from the board, I just wanted to share the recommendation of the accreditation committee. We met to consider the request of the state superintendent, board member Keith, and Chair Tharp and myself serve on the accreditation committee. And I want to kind of walk you through what we did and then what our recommendation is. So we took a look as a group at the statute that's referenced here in the superintendent's recommendation 20-7-120, having to do with excused absences from curriculum. And this is language that most recently was put in place in the 2021 legislative session. And as Julie pointed out, it talks about needing to provide 48-hour notice and also annual notification. But the key language that we looked at as a board committee is that this section of statute is about school districts notifying parents, school districts having a policy, and school districts, any prohibitions about what we can or cannot do. So we had trouble at this point finding what the role of the board would be in this. We consulted the Montana School Boards Association, and Lance Mountain shared with us model policies that they have developed and that many school districts have implemented regarding the notification of parents who want to remove their students from certain parts of the curriculum or certain parts of the instruction. We also looked at the program delivery standards related to health and physical education, and also to the science delivery standards. So taking a complete look at that, we actually concluded that we would recommend not to move forward with these rule revisions at this point. We think school districts have know what they need to do. The model policies are available to them. I can understand that there are questions sometimes to the degree needed of various notifications in the curriculum, but really didn't see where the role of the board is on this right now. So it's the recommendation of the accreditation committee that we deny the superintendent's request to open up these standards and to make revisions. I guess I would also just put in a wider context. Right now, and by the end of this meeting, we'll have 6 sets of rule revisions going on at the same time. As you know, we have math for languages, English language arts, and English learners. We're about to take on the later in this agenda. We're going to hopefully move forward with rulemaking for the early literacy targeting interventions. So I think we've got a full plate, and I think the most sort of the best recommendation to the board is to deny this request at this point. So I open it up for questions or comments from the committee.
Just a question. I don't know if you can answer this. Board Member Quinlan, or Vice you need to answer this. When are these to the science and the health and physical education? When are they up for their normal review cycle?
So I can answer that really. And I should have mentioned that the health and physical education and the science comprehensive review is scheduled to begin in October 2026. So 3 years. For less than 3 years from now.
And that's on a how many year cycle? Sorry, follow up. I apologize. Go ahead. It's on a how many year cycle? 5-year cycle? Is that correct, Dr. Myrtle? Thank you. So they were just 2 years ago, they were revised. Okay, just before my time on the board.
Board Member Hand.
You mentioned the model handbook information, and you review that and consider it fairly comprehensive.
We did. So the model policies are from the Montana School Boards Association, and to tell you the truth, I thought a lot of it was repeat of what's in the statute. So again, it's sort of hard to know what the board would add to that. Other board member questions? Mr. Chairman, I'm prepared to make a motion.
Okay, please do.
I move to deny the state superintendent's request to revise Title 10, Chapter 55, Health and Science Program Delivery Standards and proposed timeline.
Okay, motion is to deny the request of the superintendent. Title 10, Chapter 55. Third second.
Second.
Second from Board Member Key. Board discussion. Public comment.
Missoula EA president. I appreciate the motion. That's what we had hoped to hear, and just wanted to give some reassurance that that's exactly what happened. We had already had an opt-out policy in Missoula County Public Schools, for example, prior to the 2021 legislative year. We reviewed, and of course, the district consults with the attorney as well as with those other organizations that have model policy to make sure that our policies are updated accordingly. Another example is after the 2023 legislative session, starting this summer, we had 30 some policies that were up for renewal and review and underwent some changes based on the laws that were passed. So districts do this, we take it seriously, and then we make sure that it's reflected in both student handbooks and staff handbooks based on what the changes actually are. So thank you for the motion and your work.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
Hello again, Jenny Butcher from Montana Organized for Education. Just wanted to give a little bit of we represent parents and community members that are particularly active in their local schools, and they are very happy with the processes school boards have been going through to implement the new laws from the 2023 session, as well as from the 2021 session. And I appreciate that you've reviewed the Montana School Board Association policies. Almost every district in the state uses those as at least a baseline for their processes. So thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Any public comment online? All right, seeing no further public comments. Motion on the floor is to deny the request to open up Title 10, Chapter 55. And we have a motion in second. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 24, Chair Quinlan.
Our next agenda item is an action item on variance to standards, initial requests and renewals. And at this point, we turn it over to Ellery Bressler and Crystal Andrews.
Thank you, Chair Quinlan, Board Chair Tharp, and members of the board. My name is Ellery Bressler, that's Bresler for the record, and I'm an accreditation specialist at the Office of Public Instruction. Before you today are the variance to standards requests for the 2023-2024 school year, which I believe begin on page 330 of your agenda packet. The variance to standards process is outlined in the Administrative Rules of Montana, Chapter 1055-604, which also describes the formation and duties of the Variance to Standards Review Board. The review board met via Zoom on October 27th and reviewed 5 initial variance to standards applications. The meeting went well. We had all in attendance except for one member. There was a lot of robust discussion about these applications this year. They recommended 4 of the 5 of those for approval. The OPI accreditation reviewed then 2 renewal applications that did not make it in the spring deadline prior to the rule revision. So we will have a separate motion for that. Superintendent Arnson is now recommending the approval of the 4 recommended initial applications and the 2 renewal applications, which is broken into 2 separate actions. If it's okay, I'll speak to the first 4 initial variance to standards, and then for action 1, and then for action item 2, I'll speak of the 2 renewal requests. After these 2 action items, I can go over the reasons for the 1 application not being recommended.
Please continue.
Perfect. Action item 1 begins on page 339. All initial requests are for 2 years. So the first application recommended for approval was for Anaconda Junior High School and Senior High School. This is an initial request for library media specialist FTE, which is on 1055-709. The request is to have 1.0 library full-time equivalent for both high school and the junior high school. The enrollment by school enroll would require that they have a total of 1.5 FTE to cover both schools. Workable reasons include the junior high school and the senior high school are in the same building. They have a total enrollment for the 2 schools of 465, which is underneath the 1.5 requirement in rule. And there is a certified librarian available in the library all 7 periods. The second application was recommended for approval was for Eureka Elementary. You'll notice that Eureka has 2 separate recommendations, one for library and one is for school counselor. This particular one is for library. Eureka Elementary is seeking to have 0.5 library FTE for the elementary school. The current enrollment by rule would state that they need 1.0 FTE to cover this school. Workable reasons include that the elementary school sits adjacent to the middle school. The librarian from the middle school is already splitting their time to cover both. And they have an additional support of 0.5 FTE from a highly qualified paraprofessional. They have also, just a side note, that they haven't had no applications to fill the positions, although they're continuing to try. The third application that was recommended for approval was for Eureka Elementary and Eureka Middle School. The request is to have a total of 0.5 school counselor FTE for both the elementary and middle school. The required FTE amount in rule is 1.275 FTE. The workable reasons again include the proximity of the schools. They have an additional support from both a 0.5 for a qualified paraprofessional and 0.5 from a certified school psychologist. They would have a total of 1.5 FTE devoted to the counseling needs of students. Again, this is another area that they were receiving no applicants for this role, and they're continuing to try. Their current school counselor had actually asked to go down to 0.5, and they didn't want to lose that person altogether. And then the fourth and final application that was recommended for approval is for Park High School. The request is to have a total of 1.0 FTE for school counselor to cover Park High School. The required counselor FTE by rule would be 1.095. The workable reasons include additional support from coordinated professional mental health staff and additional academic support from the work-based learning coordinator. Again, they are also another school that they had no applicants for this additional FTE. And those are the initial requests.
Thank you, Ellery. And Crystal, is there anything you wanted to add before we go to board discussion?
Good morning, Chair Quinlan and the board. No, I do not have anything else to add. Thank you.
We appreciate the really thorough discussion that the Variance to Standards Committee has had, and the level of detail that I think that you provided to the board is very helpful to us. Are there questions from the board? Board member Slinger?
I just want to thank you for your work, and I thank OPI for really taking a thoughtful approach to that, and understanding the unique circumstance that every school's in. And so I'm just very appreciative of that. I believe wholly in local control, and I believe strongly about trying to support our school districts and the realization that they can't fill some of these positions. So thank you so much.
Other board members? Okay, Mr. Chair, I'm prepared to make a motion.
Go ahead.
I move to approve the superintendent's recommendations to approve the 4 initial applications for variance to standards.
Motion to approve the 4 initial applications. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second for board member Atkinson. Board member discussion. Like to echo what Dr. Slinger shared. One of my favorite things when I was at the OPI, I was serving on that variance committee, and just seeing the innovative ways that these schools come to figure out how to make things work best for them. And so this is one of the most powerful components of our accreditation system. If there's no board comment, is there any public comment? All those in favor of the 4 initial applications signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion, any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, back to you, Chair Quinlan.
Okay, and Ellery, do you want to go ahead with the renewal?
Yeah, so action 2, the renewal applications are for 3 years, and those begin on page 373 of your packet. The second group of applications are the 2 renewal applications that are seeking variance under the 1055-709 library standards. These were reviewed by the Office of Public Instruction and recommended by Superintendent Arnson. The schools for renewal are Hardin High School and Polson High School. Hardin High School is the application request is to have 1.0 library FTE to cover Hardin High School with 0.5 additional paraprofessional support. The required FTE based on rule would be 1.5. This is a renewal request for 3 years. Polson High School, the request is to have a 1.0 librarian FTE for Polson High School with 1.0 paraprofessional support in the library. The requirement under rule would require that they have 1.5 FTE. Those are the renewals.
Any questions from the board? If not, Mr. Chairman, I'm ready to make a motion.
Please do.
Okay, I move to approve the superintendent's recommendation to approve the two requests for renewals for variance to standards.
Two renewals, there a second? Second by board member Hammond. Board discussion? Any public comment? In favor of the two renewals, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, Ellery, and thank you, Crystal, for those two pieces.
And additionally, I can talk about the one application that was not included, if you guys would still like to hear that.
And that's the one that's currently in compliance. Is that the one you're talking about?
Yep, it is for Glacier Gateway Elementary.
Oh, okay, go ahead, please.
Yeah, so the superintendent had actually felt that this was a not applicable application. Glacier Gateway Elementary had requested a variance for the library media specialist position under 1055-709. The application was to have 1.0 total library media specialist FTE to cover the elementary school. The reason that they had applied is because they tend to fluctuate throughout the year to over 500, but their enrollment count in the fall was 493. So they're actually currently in compliance with this rule. The Variance to Standard Board felt that this should not be the precedent set that schools apply for variance before knowing that they need this. In this case, with 493 students, the school would not be out of compliance with 709. It was suggested from the Variance to Standard Board that we potentially look at adding a spring application date in the future after the spring count date to accommodate schools that face this problem, that they will likely be over 500 by the end of the school year.
Mr. McLeod, would you like to make some comments?
Yes, thank you. My name is Mark McCord. I'm the curriculum director here in Columbia Falls School District 6. As Ellery said so well, we did apply for a variance to standards for Glacier Gateway Elementary regarding the school library media specialist. We are very close to that 500. In fact, as of today, we are at 500 and soon to go over it. Just looking for a way to potentially create either a later date for submission. As she mentioned, the board might be considering that. As you know, it's a relatively involved process that takes time. There's a required community meeting. Of course, the application drafting, and ultimately the school board approval process. It feels as if the process is wasted if we continue with the current situation. So just considering the possibility for schools that are approaching these staffing cutoffs, to have the time and the space to do it after we know that it's necessary. We're not changing what's on the variance we're doing this year anyway. That application, that is really what we're doing to support the staff and the students, because we know we're going to be right at that point and or over it very shortly. We're just looking for a difference in the process itself so that we don't end up with what I would consider to be some wasted time.
Mr. McCord, we appreciate the situation you're in, and we appreciate you bringing it to our attention. I think the board is interested in OPI's recommendations for convening the Variance to Standards Committee in the spring. So we'll look to continue discussions on that. Chair Tharp, is there anything you want to add to that?
Thank you. I just think this is one of the things with the revision of chapter 55. There were so many things with accreditation that used to be set on a firm hard fall count. You're counting your students, looking at the teachers, the assignments, all of those things that revolved around a fall date. And so I think with the evolution of chapter 55 to being a more fluid process and also not being set in the fall, the situation that Mr. McCord describes would have been one that went under the radar for OPI and the Board of Public Ed, because we based it upon the fall counts. But with the revisions that are occurring, I think what Ellery and Chris are looking at is that it probably makes sense to have a spring process as well. So I have confidence that the variances committee has already recognized things and is working on a solution. All right, anything else on that item? Okay, back to you, Chair Quinlan, for item 25.
Next item is an update on the annual data collection. Is Chris Sinrud on? Good morning, Chris. Whenever you're ready, we're happy to receive your report.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah.
Wonderful. I'm not sure how all of you folks can sit there and not be really excited about the game tomorrow, and I would just be way too antsy to be here. But I want to thank you for your dedication and thoroughness in this. Good morning, Mr. Chair and Education Board members. My name is Chris Sinrud, spelled S-I-N-R-U-D. I'm the Chief Information Officer for the Office of Public Instruction. In your packet on page 401 is the information in regard to the various collections OPI did this fall. The schools did an amazing job providing the information for these collections. Some of them needed assistance from us, and we were there to help them manage those opportunities and challenges that they had. I'm happy to report that the graph on page 402 is out of date and inaccurate. All the collections for this period are complete, so we're at 100% on all those, and that data is being analyzed and prepped for everything from federal reporting, accountability, accreditation, and the report card, just to mention a few. I want to thank you for your time. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Are there any questions from the board? Chris, I have a question. I think I know the answer, but can you explain the difference between the fall A&B collection and the fall enrollment count collection?
The fall enrollment count is a little bit different than the A and B. The irony there is there's just a few more aspects that are in the fall count that are not necessarily utilized in the A and B. And if you would like, I can get you those specific differences for those. I'm not really clear on some of those variances.
And maybe on just a higher level there, then the fall enrollment count is the head count of students in the schools. The A and B, what you're calling the A and B collection is actually the calculation of A and B for districts to use in their upcoming budgets.
Correct. We do a fall count, and then we average that with the A and B count that is collected in the spring for those budget numbers, and what those average amounts would be per school, per student, that funding would be built around.
Any other questions from members of the board? Thank you, Chris. I hope your team wins.
I grew up in the Bitterroot, and my kids went to MSU, but I'm a Carroll guy, so you know, I kind of gotta love them all.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time today. I appreciate it.
Mr. Chair, I'm ready for item 26. We're ready. And this is an action item for the timeline on chapter 3, English language proficiency content standard. And I'm listed as the presenter. So do we have any is there anyone from OPI who wants to make any comments on this? Okay. Paul had a couple of comments related to the dates that are in italics, so I'll ask her to address that.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. If you'll see the March 8th final public comment deadline happens to land at the same time of our adoption notice for the BPE to consider and respond to comments. Clearly, that's not going to work. And for this
rule revision particularly, it wouldn't be a problem because there is a delayed effective date until July 1, 2025. But I should note that this timeline basically mirrors chapter 57, which we've already approved, but the administrative rulemaking schedule came out after you all had approved sort of the high level timeline. So Mr. Chair, I hope you guys will all indulge me. I anticipate that I'll send out sort of a couple other meeting opportunities that are later in March and not the 7th and 8th, so that we can still stick to the schedule, but also just not have to delay that and instead move our meetings back. We don't have to deal with that now, but I think it's something that folks online should anticipate us moving that March 7th and 8th date.
Are there any questions from the board before we move to a motion? Chair, I'm prepared to make a motion.
Okay, go ahead.
I move to approve the proposed timeline for the revisions to Title 10, Chapter 53, English Language Proficiency Content Standards.
Okay, motion on the floor to move forward with our schedule on chapter 53. Is there a second? Second by board member Teeth. Any board discussion? Any public comment? Right, seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 27.
27 is the initial review of the superintendent's proposed revisions to the English Language Proficiency Content Standards. So I'll turn that over to Marie.
Hello, Chairman Tharp, Chairman Quinlan, and members of the board. Again, I'm Marie Judish, Judisch, Senior Manager of Teaching and Learning. I'm here to share with you the proposal notice for the English Language Learners Proficiency Content Standards. So you will see the background here on ARM 10, Chapter 53, Subchapter 3. In alliance with ESSA and ESEA, the ELP standards are a unique set of standards as they address our students who are learning English and directly linked to each academic area rather than standalone standards. You will see the reference to the acronym WIDA, which has gone through a few iterations, including Wisconsin, Indiana, etc. And then it once stood for World-Class Instructional Design, but no longer stands for an acronym and just stands alone as WIDA. So I wanted to make that of note for you. And it is a consortia of all the states, territories, schools, and federal agencies that are within that consortia. The ELP standards were last updated in 2011 with the alignment to the 2012 WIDA English Language Development Standards. The 2020 update from WIDA triggered a review for the Montana ELP standards. It is worth mentioning that the ELP Proficiency Assessment Access is created and aligned in alignment with WIDA and is our Montana assessment for English language proficiency learners. The superintendent brought the standards to negotiate rulemaking in straight alignment with the WIDA standards. The superintendent, based on input from the task force, recommended to remove the performance descriptors and leave the chapter focused only on the content. However, they did not take that recommendation from the NRC in removing the performance descriptors. It's worth noting that they did not want to see anything that could support students, primarily our Native American students who are identified as English language learners. So with that, you will see moving through the ARM proposal, the red line strikes. There's very, very minimal. It truly just strikes the word must as it translates from content standard 1 through 5. And then continued alignment with no change in subchapters 306 through 311. You will also see in your packet that there is an economic impact statement. The negotiated rulemaking committee saw that there was no need for an economic impact survey. Sorry, was there a comment or question? I couldn't see.
No, there's not.
Okay, sorry, thank you. With very minimal changes, the negotiated rulemaking committee saw that there would be no economic impact to schools other than the cost that was ran with the agencies running the task force and the negotiated rulemaking committee. And with that, I do stand for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Marie. We're looking at some pretty basic changes to the rules. Do any board members have any questions or comments? Seeing none, Mr. Chair, I'm prepared to make a motion.
Go ahead.
I move to approve the proposed notice of public hearing and time and Okay, oh, no.
Yeah, that's mine.
Okay,
There it is, Ann.
I move to approve the notice of proposed rulemaking for Title 10, Chapter 53, English Language Proficiency Standards.
Heard the motion, is there a second? Second by Board Member Hammond. Board member discussion? Public comment? Let's see how much public comment, striking the word must generate. Don't anticipate as much as we had during chapter 55, but it certainly.
I wasn't listening.
All right, so all in favor?
Seconded.
Jane.
Thank you.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Anything else, Chair Quinn?
That's it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, moving on to item number 28, our assessment committee chairman, Chair Keith, please take over.
Thank you, sir. On page 431, you see the proposed timeline for our early literacy target intervention standards. Yesterday we had the panelists and we looked at that document, so this is really just the end of that process. Nicole, is there anything you want to explain or clarify?
Yeah, thank you. If folks have any questions, the appendix is on page 141. Your action today would be appendix A of the rule is on page 141. Your action today would be to allow us to start that rulemaking process. You'll see in there that we do have a date held for the public hearing that would be held on January 4th at 10 a.m. in room 152 of the Capitol. I'll preside over that hearing, which allows folks to make comments then. There's also a public comment period, which is noted in the timeline where folks can email our office. You all will be able to see the comments in January and respond to any, and then final action will be in March.
Member Rasmussen?
I noticed that we have the EPD authorization published, notice adoption scheduled for March 7th and 8th. We change our meeting date, that will need to change as well as the adoption notice to SOS for publication on the 12th. It's likely that our meeting will be after that. We need to reflect that change as we adopt this, or can we just do that as we move along?
We can do that as we go along, and I do want to note that at the bottom of the page, it does say that the board may revise the above dates based on, you know, sort of anything that comes up. A lot of these schedules aren't published. The rulemaking schedules aren't published until the fall, so we can only make assumptions sometimes of when we think we'll see. But if we do move that March meeting, it will have impact, but not a large one. Okay, thank you.
I have a question as well. Does the statute that set up the early literacy targeted intervention program, we have a April 1st deadline to.
No, not necessarily. The legislation actually says the Board of Public Ed must implement in the spring of 2024. But the reason why we set that April 1 date was because if you remember, school districts are encouraged, it says they may assess students in April, May, or June. So we wanted to have all this information in place for school districts who may want to start that in April. That's why the April 1 date. Okay, yeah, you could say whatever you think spring is.
Technically until June 19th.
That's right.
And just to clarify that, our adoption, no matter what, will be in March. Even though the publication maybe is going to be on the fields. Correct. Yeah.
Any other questions, comments? Third, I'm ready to make a motion.
Please do.
I move to approve the proposed notice of public hearing and timeline pertaining to rulemaking in Title 10, Chapter 54, early literacy targeted intervention standards, and authorized filing of the notice with the Secretary of State for publication in the Montana Administrative Register.
Very good. Is there a second? You do not have to restate the motion.
Good. I'll second that.
Okay, we got a motion and a second to open up chapter 54 for early literacy, and with our timeline. Is there any more discussion? Any public comment? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. All right, thank you, Chair Keith. Executive Director Flynn, please review our future agenda items.
Thank you, Chair Tharp. Notice that our next meeting is January 18th and 19th in Helena. We'll be at the Capitol. You may notice that we do not have the MSCB evaluation at our November meeting, which is when we usually do it. But as you guys know, you're usually running from one building to another, and we're usually behind, not ahead of time. So we thought it made sense to move it to January and give Paul sort of a little bit more time and not feel so rushed to go through his evaluation. So you'll see that that is on our future agenda items. There's a whole list of other things that we'll do as well. You can see it's going to be a really robust meeting per usual. But I suppose that is all I have to add at this time.
Okay, at this time we will open this up for any public comment. General information. Ms. Bernier.
Hello again. Again, Jenny Murnian Butcher, Deputy Director of Montanans Organized for Education. I just briefly wanted to chat about two things that you'll be considering the next couple months. The first one is the ABCTE alternative pathway. I guess our members are particularly concerned about having highly qualified teachers in their schools. And while we know the value of hands-on experience, I really agree with what the vice chair said, which is that some training is better than none, especially in our teaching shortage. But with that in mind, SB 373 that created the alternative pathway gives the BPE the option to require participation in district mentorship and induction. And while that's already a part of Chapter 55, I would encourage the board to include that as they adopt. The law also requires training in Indian education for all, which is not currently part of ABCTE. And so I would just encourage the board to work with OPI to make sure that we know what that's going to look like. And the only concern looking at the qualification is particularly the special education requirements. I'd really be curious to know what that test pertains to. There's not a lot of content area that's covered for the SPED specific, and that's a particularly challenging job to do, especially without hands-on experience. There have been other states that have accepted ABCTE with the exception of SPED, such as Missouri. So maybe just look at that specifically. And then the other thing I wanted to discuss was, I know you are working so hard to look at all of those charter applications, and just to keep in mind equitable access as you look at those, particularly for children with disabilities, particularly for transportation and free and reduced lunch, just making sure that there aren't barriers to access even within a district that could prevent all students from applying. And then lastly, looking at how those charters might affect neighboring communities or rural communities, if it is a charter that's accepting students outside of the district, how that could impact the communities. I know that HB 549 requires the board to look specifically at how a charter will impact the surrounding community. And I think it kind of complicates things when some of the applications are looking to pull kids from other communities. So those are just some things to keep in mind. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. And I encourage you to put your comments in writing as well, so that especially as we consider both those topics at future meetings.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Other public comment. Dr. Walker.
Thanks again, Sheriff Tharp. For the record, Rob Watson, School Administrator in Montana. Apologize, I wasn't able to be here on your first day. I would have provided comments before you started, but thanks for allowing me just to say a few things today at the end. The reason I want to tell you a couple of these is because Board of Public Ed is involved in some of our work, and I just want to share that so you understand that crosswalk. We've got a lot of great stuff happening at SAM right now, and I think it's good time to update the board. McCall participated in a SAM webinar that we had, and that's something new that we started this year. We started, quite frankly, not knowing how many participants we would have. We started with a generative AI presentation, in September, and which, by the way, these webinars are open to anybody. We don't require you to be a SAM member. Anybody can participate, even yourself. They're always the second Thursday of the month at 10 o'clock. We realize that doesn't work for everybody, so we do record those, and I can share those recordings with McCall if the board would like to see these. But we started the year with a generative AI discussion. We had 60 people tune in, which was an all-time high for us. And then the very next month, we did an accreditation webinar with the help of OPI. We had 100 people tune in, and our Zoom account was set at 100. So a lot of people got kicked out because we kind of broke our own Zoom. And then the last one we just had with McCall and a few other folks from the early literacy committee. We upped our Zoom account to 500, which seemed to help. We have had over 150 people participate in that webinar, which is really great. So these are educators and leaders from all over the state. There were school board members on that as well. So just really exciting to be able to offer that. Our webinars are designed to have hot button topics, which we appear to have a few hot button topics this year, and then also just-in-time topics. So McCall's example was definitely a just-in-time topic because our members are asking about the early literacy information. So we'll have one every month. I encourage you to tune in. We'll advertise those. A big piece of that is marketing those ahead of time, which we'll continue to do. We had 5 SAM members participating in the Early Literacy Council, so I just really appreciate McCall's willingness to allow our members on that committee. Our focus this year is resilient leaders in healthy schools. We're trying to carry that throughout the year in all of our work and all that we do. And I think I just want to mention a couple of other things related to that. I talked earlier about the aspiring principals cohort. This is really exciting for me because it's a way for us to kind of rebuild that principal pipeline in our state. We were hoping for 25 people to sign up. That's sort of our break-even point with these programs. We had more than 50 people sign up, quite honestly, from all over the place. I was just looking back at the list, a lot of small schools, a lot of large schools. One of the things that we required is that they had to have the nomination from their current superintendent to be part of the cohort. And so that just goes to show you that our superintendents are really anxious to get these new leaders going on their journey. So 50 people really excited with that work. We have one other cohort that I want to tell you about because it involves MSDB. We have what's called a Learning 2025 cohort, and that's an innovation thing that we have about 12 districts in the state that are looking at innovation and looking what happens next in education. Paul with MSDB signed up for that cohort, and his school is involved in that. That's a state cohort, but it's also a national cohort. So he represents the only school in the entire country in that Learning 2025 cohort that has serves the population that he has. So very unique opportunity for him and to be part of that work. Last thing, I promise this is it, because I know your time is precious, but on the horizon, and this is an announcement here that I'm making that I haven't made yet because we just found out about it yesterday, but Sam was the recipient of a Montana Healthcare Foundation grant. It's a $75,000 grant. Our grant will, the purpose of our grant is to do a research study and a survey of current school-based healthcare practices with regards to mental health and other school-based healthcare practices. So we're going to take a look at what's currently happening in the state with regards to school-based mental health. And then we'll develop a resource guide for all schools to use if they're trying to implement school-based mental health in their school. We also had support from DPHHS for this grant because DPHHS wants to help define what school-based mental health looks like, and they need to know what's currently happening, what best practices are. So as you'll recall, in the last legislative session, DPHHS was a recipient of a fairly large pot of money to work on mental health services in our state. And so they've been asking, like, what can we do or how can we help with this money for schools? So I believe that this work that we're going to do will really help define DPHHS and their next steps with how to address school-based mental health. So those are some things that Sam is working on. I just want you to know that we work to support our members, but we also work to support your work with OPI, your work as a board. So we're always open to doing things that can help you further your initiatives and your purposes. I think we have some great partnerships already and just look forward to continuing that. So thank you.
Thank you, Rob. And you missed the first day when my report included a discussion on a meeting I had with Representative Dean and how it really this past week. And we talked about some of the on a roadshow to find out what communities want. And so we have been working in Richland County. I've got 3 schools that are starting Hope Squad starting the second semester. We've got Lambert and Fairview and Ritchie. And so let me know, happy to participate in that study and continue to help support that.
Thank you.
Any other public comment? At this time, I want to acknowledge our staff. It is always difficult for us to be on the road. I think it's vital of this organization to be out in the schools, traveling around, getting to the different parts of the state. And that is so important, I think, for our work and to be able to see that. But I also recognize it puts quite a burden on Julie and Chris and McCall, and we thank you for all of your work. And I want to thank our hosts who made it possible for us to be here in Missoula. Superintendent Hill with our first 2 days of meetings at the Missoula County Public Schools Admin Building, and Dr. Lee for hosting us here today at the Phyllis J. Washington School of Education. Any board member comments? Yes, ma'am.
May we will always be at MSDB, so we'll always be in Great Falls, but I think for September, I think we're gonna go to.
And Dr. Barron put in a pitch
Yeah.
yesterday.
She'll have to fight step and try by, I think, Glendive. See who wins that arm wrestle.
Our next meeting is a special meeting on November 27th at 1 o'clock, and that is right now. Our agenda is just a couple of items for MSDB. And then our marathon meeting on November 30th to consider charter school applications. And we have 25 charter school applications to consider. And then our next regular meeting is going to be in January, and we'll be back. At this time, as we adjourn, the note for members, we are meeting with the Regent for lunch at 12 at the University Center. And then as our Constitution calls for, a Board of Education meeting made up of the Board of Public Education and the Board of Regents meeting together annually. We will convene that in the University Center ballroom at 1 p.m. And with that, we will adjourn the Montana Board of Public Education. Thanks for your attendance.
Thank you.
Wow.